to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to finally recap the New York Giants draft class for the 2020 draft. I wanted to have this up earlier. I didn't have a voice posted in my community notes, so hopefully you guys saw that. And I'm going to have a bunch more videos out. I'll probably have a couple more out today. I'm going to be on with Fireside Giants on their podcast in a couple hours, so looking forward to talking to them about the draft class as well, getting their thoughts on it. But I am a big fan. We're going to get into all of it. Of course, you guys know I was very outspoken saying that I think the New York Giants needed to address the offensive line at all costs this offseason. It has been one of our biggest problems going forward, and I've said that I think an improved offensive line will help the defense, and I've said it's going to be a two or 3 year process, and we're not going to be able to fill all of our holes in one free agency period and one draft class, especially with the new coaching staff, all the players we got rid of, and they didn't, but you couldn't have expected that going in. They certainly helped both the offense and the defense, and one thing that really hit home for me, the defensive players that they brought in specifically early really are going to add to the flexibility that this defense is going to have, or the versatility is the better word for it, as Joe Judge always says. So I was a big fan of this draft and the way that the New York Giants handled it. And overall, I would give them at worst a B, probably a B plus in the way that they went about with this draft. And we're going to jump into all of it. Now, going into the draft, I know that we had holes, and I know people wanted a tall wide receiver, and I'm going to do a video on the undrafted free agents. The Giants brought in some wide receiver prospects. I know that we wanted to fill more holes. We wanted an edge rusher. They didn't really, get anyone in the early round. So, was it a perfect draft? No, but what the New York Giants did was they were forward thinking. It wasn't just about this year with this draft. It's about the next 5, 6, 7 years with some of the prospects that they brought in, and I can't really argue with many of the early picks, but let's jump right into it. The first guy I wanted to talk about, of course, was none other than Andrew Thomas. And to me, this was the perfect first pick for the New York Giants at number 4 overall. Obviously, I would have preferred a trade down if possible, but at the end of the day, I don't think that there was a trade available. The Detroit Lions, by all accounts, were trying to trade down at all costs. At number 3, they didn't trade down. They stayed put and took Jeff Okudah. And if they weren't able to orchestrate a trade, I don't think the New York Giants were able to orchestrate one either. So what they did was they stood there and they selected the guy that they knew they were taking all along. Reports have come out that Joe Judge had told Andrew Thomas 3 days in advance, if you're there when we're picking, we're going to take you. Giants fell in love with this prospect. He was the consensus number 1 offensive tackle months leading up into the draft. And then, of course, the Combine changed all these mock drafts. You got opinions from guys like Daniel Jeremiah, and that kind of confused everyone. But you go back. Andrew Thomas never surrendered a sack all year, didn't surrender a QB hit. The guy's consistent. The guy's played left tackle, and he's exactly what the New York Giants should be looking for on that offensive line, and hopefully he's going to be there with Daniel Jones for the next 15 years. I loved this pick, and it was the perfect Joe Judge pick. I want to get back to those days from 10 years ago when going into the game, defenses knew what we were going to do, and we did it anyway because we beat them in the trenches. That has been the mission statement for Dave Gettleman since he's gotten here. Well, we're starting to get back to that, and this draft is going to go a long way. I think Andrew Thomas is going to start at the left tackle position. No doubt in my mind. Whether or not they'll move on from Nate Solder, that remains to be seen. I don't think they will. I think they need some experience on that line, but if they do, it will be after June. I think it's June 1st when they'll be able to split the cap hit over the 2 seasons. I read some rumors that maybe they bring in Marcus Golden with that. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. I still think Solder's going to be on the roster. I expect Andrew Thomas to start at the left tackle. I expect Solder to start at the right. If Solder were to be cut, well, then you got Cam Fleming. I do not think that Matt Pearlt, I think that's how you pronounce it, out of UConn is going to start day 1, but we're going to get into him, and I am a big fan of him as well. The next guy we're going to talk about is Xavier McKinney. And I didn't do a lot of homework on Xavier McKinney because I never thought in a million years he was going to be there when we picked at 37. The more I hear about this guy, the more I read about him, the more I am in love with this pick. First off, you look at most mocks going into the draft, a lot of people had him going 17th to the Dallas Cowboys, and he very well may have went there. The Cowboys had to take CeeDee Lamb. Was far and away the best talent there when they were picking at 17. Nobody thought Lamb would be there, but because they got Lamb, and because there weren't a lot of teams that, number 1 priority was to get a safety, McKinney was able to fall all the way down to the New York Giants. Now, is McKinney Isaiah Simmons? I'm not going to tell you he's that, but he's certainly going to bring versatility. He's a guy that you could put up in, put in a variety of positions. The guy had over 100 snaps at 4 different positions at Alabama, and there's the connection to Joe Judge. And Joe Judge brought in all these players that could do multiple things. Absolutely love this pick with McKinney out of Alabama, and it's going to be interesting to see what they could do with the secondary, and we're going to get into their 4th-round pick as well, but you're going to be able to move people around throughout this secondary. People worry about Julian Love. I still think Julian Love's going to have a role. You have to remember, guys like Peppers, even McKinney, you could line these guys up in the linebacker spot in certain packages. We have to almost think of this defense as a positionless defense. They're gonna mix and match. They're gonna put guys in different spots, but this certainly has the versatility. McKinney is a very good football player. We got a 1st-round talent in the 2nd round, and this was a common theme, at least early on in the draft. The New York Giants went for best player available. Next, we're gonna talk about is Matt Peart. The Giants here, I thought were gonna go center. I did. We needed a center. Definitely thought we were gonna go center, and when they selected him, this was a pleasant surprise. You guys know I'm all about forward thinking. I'm all about the future. And I didn't think that we were going to take another tackle in the 3rd round. This is about the future. This is not about next year. Matt Peart has everything you read about this kid. And I'm going to do an individual video on him out of UConn. He has huge upside. The other thing I love about him, he's from the Bronx. He grew up a Giants fan. Great kid from everything you read. And I think he's going to be a great fit. I think he's going to be a starter on this offensive line in 2021. I think they're going to mentor him this year. He's going to be your starting right tackle, and it's going to give the Giants the freedom and ability to go out there and add that wide receiver or add that edge rusher in next year's draft, depending on where they're picking in the 1st round. But love this pick. I think he had the longest arms of any offensive tackle at the combine. Big time potential talent. Needs to hone his game a little bit, needs to pack on some muscle, but this was good value. This is about where he should have went, and this was a pleasant surprise to me for the Giants to be forward thinking. And I want to commend Dave Gettleman for that. A guy that's on the hot seat. Didn't just think about this season. He set this team up for the next 4 or 5 years. That's what this draft was about. The New York Giants, Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman realized this is not a Super Bowl roster yet. And they're building this team for the next decade. Next guy we're going to talk about, another surprise pick to me, but when you did the research and when you looked into it, it was a good pick. Darnay Holmes, very fast. I think he ran a 4.46 or a 4.48 at the combine, projects to be a nickel corner. A lot of people had him rated as the best nickel corner in this year's draft class. And another guy that's going to bring versatility. Like I said, they're going to be able to mix and match. Who knows how they're going to do this? Patrick Graham had some formations last year where he had six pass rushers on the field at once. They're going to be able to do a lot of different things by bringing these players in. But I was completely for this. You go back, you look at my during the live stream, I said they may take pride here out of Notre Dame. They went with Holmes instead, who's a nickel corner, and by many people's standards going into the draft, a lot of people thought he might have been the best nickel corner in this year's draft. And like I said, you almost have to think of this as a positionless defense. They just want guys that could do a lot of things, that they could move around and bring versatility to this defense, and that's what allows them to do. Do I think Julian Love might be affected by some of these picks? It depends. It's going to depend how he plays at camp, but I like Love. I still think he's going to have a role in this roster. I just think you're going to have a lot of formations where you have multiple DBs. Some formations where you have a lot of linebackers. I think the Giants are going to confuse the teams that they're playing. I love the depth, and I love that he's going to be able to move people around in this defense. And the next guy we're going to talk about is one of my favorite picks in this year's draft. No doubt about it. Shane Lemieux. Absolutely love this pick. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the 7th rounders, but I will have individual videos up on them as well. I kind of wanted to go over the 5 guys that the top 5 picks, and I'll probably touch on another guy as well. But I loved the Shane Lemieux pick. Now, Shane Lemieux is a guard, and people, when we picked him, said, why are you taking a guard there? Obviously, that's the strength of our offensive line. You drafted Hernandez in the 2nd. You got Zeitler, who's our best offensive lineman currently before the draft. Now, you could definitely probably say it's Andrew Thomas. But they said, why are you taking a guard? Why don't you go with the center? Well, first off, he's been taking snaps at center. Joe Judge came out and said he's going to be versatile. We're going to train him to both be a center and a guard. It's going to add a competition to that center position between him and Gates. Lemieux is a tough offensive lineman when you look at the tape. Reminds you a lot of Will Hernandez. This guy's a beast. And I think there were about 400 passing attempts, if I'm not mistaken, where he was blocking last year. Did not surrender a sack at his position. I'm a big fan of this pick in the 5th round. Some people had him regarded as one of the top 3 guards in this year's draft. I didn't see any lower than 5th or 6th. You got some depth, and at the bare minimum, this is a guy you stick on the bench, and if somebody gets hurt, you put him in, and he's a guy that can replace Zeitler in 2 years if you decide to move on and not keep Zeitler, after his contract is up. So, like this move as well. And in the 5th round, I know people want an immediate impact player. More often than not, a 5th rounder is not going to be an immediate impact player, especially if you're a team that's trying to compete. You want your 5th round picks to provide depth and potentially become starters in a year or two, to learn under some of the veterans. Forward thinking yet again. And that's what this draft was all about. Absolutely love the pick there with Shane Lemieux. In terms of the 6th and 7th round talent, like I said, I'm going to do more in-depth videos on all of them, but I liked a lot of them. I mean, Cam Brown came out and said how he hates the Cowboys. They drafted a lot of linebackers, but those guys, I think, are a lot of the reason why they brought them in were to be special teams contributors. They drafted Brown, they drafted Brunson, and they drafted Crowder, all who play the linebacker position. Crowder was Mr. Irrelevant. The other 2 picks, they brought in a corner with Chris Williamson, and they brought in Carter Coughlin. Carter Coughlin is an interesting guy. I can't wait to go deeper into it, but I found some very interesting statistics on him, and I think he could be a productive player that I expect to make this roster. But all in all, guys, I loved the draft. I loved that they stayed to what they should have, in my opinion, all along. They thought long-term in both free agency and the draft. They focused on the offensive line, and I couldn't be happier. The future for this team is bright. They were forward-thinking. It wasn't just about this year, and I commend Dave Gettleman, and I commend Joe Judge on a terrific first draft as the New York Giants head coach. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.